All right, Pablo and Angelo, you guys need to move so you can see the screen. Do so. All right. All right, so I finished last time with talking about the ballerinas, correct? All right, let's focus on this slideshow. Did I talk about the bathers? I talked about the bathers and how they are influenced by Japanese art. Okay. And I talked about the horsies. All right, the horsies. All right, so Degas not only liked doing artwork about ballerinas and bathers, that he also did artwork of racehorses. And basically, that's all I really need to say about that. He's famous for doing these racehorse pictures and the jockeys. And that should finish us with Degas. All right, and that will also finish us with part 3. We can go into part 4. Renoir did the bathers as well. Yeah, late in life, and so his are a lot more classical. So yeah, I guess that's a interesting point. So Renoir's bathers would be multiple bathers, and they're a lot more classical. They're a lot people taking baths out in the pond, whereas Degas would be a bather taking an actual like bathtub or a basin inside the home. Degas is more realistic, and Renoir's is more classical. Degas will also be primarily in chalk, and Renoir's will be in oil paint. All right, so much art history and never enough time to cover it all. So let's go run through the art museum. We are halfway through chapter 28. We're beginning part 4 of 6. And we are going to look at post-impressionism. Now, post-impressionism is not a unified group. In almost all of art history up to this far, these movements have been rather unified, that a group of artists all have the same goal and they all have the same way of achieving that goal. But these post-impressionists are beginning to just do their own things. And also, by the way, what does post mean? Is it in post-impressionism, what does post mean? After, right. However, there's that's kind of inaccurate because this post-impressionism is running at the same time as impressionism. So it's not very post. It's kind of like impressionism adjacent. But it did not last long, but it quickly evolved into early 20th century modernism. And that's kind of what I like about it. I love modern art, so this is like the beginnings of modern art. And we have this one critic, Felix Fénéon, and he says Seurat is a leader of a new group of artists, the Neo-Impressionists. So it's the 1880s, 12 years after the Impressionism show. Impressionism is still going strong, but a new group of artists are doing something different. The group is labeled Neo-Impressionist and then later Post-Impressionist. Fénéon identified greater scientific rigor as the key difference between Neo-Impressionism and its predecessor. He said the Impressionists were arbitrary in their techniques. The Neo-Impressionists had developed a conscious and scientific method and the careful study of contemporary color theory. And if we can get into like comparing a Impressionism painting and a post-Impressionism painting of the same subject, we can see a lot of the differences. You've probably seen the painting over there on the right. It's one of those very famous paintings. And it is done with dots, or that's small dabs of paint. And we'll look a little bit more closely at this artist a little bit later. But it is a lot more scientific in his study of color theory than the Impressionists. Now, Monet was very scientific. He did the haystacks and he did the cathedrals, and he was very scientific at it. But the other Impressionists were not so much. But Seurat is like even Seurat was even more so scientific than even Monet. He was more careful with his brushwork, almost automated. The Impressionists defied the rules, and the post-Impressionists followed the rules of color theory. And one of the rules was you only use primary colors. Another rule was not mixing opposite colors. And Seurat labored over the composition, very stiff composition over there on the right. Like, of these two paintings, which one do the people look more natural? Which one do the people look more natural? Which one looks like a bunch of robots? Yeah, the one on the right looks like robots, right? The one on the left looks more natural. People are, in various different poses, where the one on the right is very stiff. All right, so let me introduce you to Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. So this guy is from a wealthy family. He is aristocratic. Now, do you notice something odd about him? Yeah, like oddly short, right? He had bad genetics, and he is from an inbred family. Inbreeding is common among aristocratic families that want to keep the uh, the the genetics within the family. Three of his cousins had dwarfism. One of his cousins relied on crutches to walk. His parents shared the same grandmother, and he was born with a disease. He was born with PYCD. I'll have to look up what that is. But he has brittle bones and abnormalities to his hands and face. He broke his left femur at 11 years old, and he was bedridden for a while, and he painted in order to pass the time. Next year, he broke his right femur, and both legs stopped growing. He was ridiculed from a young age, and so later on, he turned to alcoholism. And that cane that you see him with, that cane is hollow on the inside, and he would fill it with alcohol. All right, I want you to know what Moulin Rouge is. Now, I've told you before what a Moulin is. We looked at Moulin de la Galette. Does anybody remember what a Moulin means? Say that again. A male? Oh, male, yes, that's right, exactly right. And you can see it right here. There's the mill. And then what does rouge mean? Red, yeah. It's the red mill. This was a very popular nightclub. A lot of drinking, a lot of dancing, and it was in the neighborhood where artists would mingle with the lower classes. It was adventurous for the middle class to go through the artsy part of town. And Toulouse-Lautrec partied all night, every night. And Toulouse-Lautrec had a regular reserved table here at the Moulin Rouge, and he drank in a lot. So let me show you what kind of entertainment they had at the Moulin Rouge. That's Toulouse-Lautrec drawing. All right, so a couple things I want to point out from there, and I heard a couple people laugh at the right spot. So you notice when they had lifted up their skirts and stuck out their butts, and then the guys' monocles fell out. All right, so that was like they still do the can dance, and when the women dance, they're wearing thongs instead of these like pantaloons or whatever, and so it's just as risque. Like that was seeing women's underwear for the first time, or that's the level of like shockingness that these women are dancing to lift up their skirts like that. So and then also I also want you to notice how noisy that environment was. So when we look at these next few paintings and images of the Moulin Rouge, just imagine how noisy the environment is. So one of the things that Toulouse-Lautrec did is he created posters for the Moulin Rouge, posters as advertising. And he created about 30 posters. These are lithographs. And by the way, lithograph is another type of printmaking that we won't really cover much in this class, but what does litho mean, or lith? Remember monoliths from Paleolithic and Neolithic art? Stone, right? So it's a print done with stone. These were basically just advertising posters, but now they are iconic images. And for the first time in history, we are elevating advertising to high art. These are now the original posters are now artworks in and of themselves. But a lot of his images are paintings and drawings of scenes within the Moulin Rouge. So we're going to take a look at this one right here. It's called At the Moulin Rouge. This gives you a sense of how large the artwork is. And if we get a closer look of it, so we have a group of people in conversation. They are drinking, and imagine the noisy environment that is here. And it would like we wouldn't be able to hear that conversation because of the noisy environment. And all of these people have been identified. These are dancers and photographers. One of them is a champagne salesman, several dancers, the manager, and then number 8 there in the center top, that is Toulouse-Lautrec himself. He painted himself in that picture. And then I want you to notice the woman there on the right. She is wearing excessive makeup. And it's not just like weird colors, but you can see her ear and her neck has no makeup on it. There's some detail on that. And has anybody ever been on stage or done a play or anything? And like the makeup that you put on when you're on stage is different than the everyday makeup. And that is kind of what's going on here, is that these ladies have excessive makeup. You can see number 2 back here. She has excessive makeup on. And obviously the one on the right has excessive makeup on. And this section over here with this woman was added later. So it's an extra piece of wood that is in there. And when you look closely there, you can see the color of her ear is not the same as her face. That's that excessive stage makeup. She has exaggerated colors on her face. And then notice how the light is lighting her up from below. And that's a reference to stage lighting. Before there was electric lights on stages, they had stage lighting. So these little lights down at the bottom lit up the actors from below. And Toulouse-Lautrec was heavily influenced by Degas. So here are some of the things that he got from Degas. One is the asymmetrical balance. Notice how in the Degas picture and the Toulouse-Lautrec picture, most of the people are on the right side, and there's a big empty space in the lower left. The diagonals he got from Degas, and the cropped figures. Excuse me. Thank you. I feel blessed. And then also the strong linear patterns. All this he got from Degas. And also there's a Japanese influence, the linearity of the Japanese woodblock prints. And a lot of the elements are outlined like Japanese prints. And then the other thing I want to talk about is the influence of photography. And one of the things that photography does, especially with candid photography, is that it crops people. And these artists are beginning to look at photographs of people having been cropped and then including those into their paintings. I've just recently made the Unit 3 test, and one of the questions I know is, what kind of influence did photography have on that? And that's one of the things, is that the cropped images. All right, so this is a satire on a nightclub scene. Everybody is giving a false persona. Anyways, moving on to Toulouse-Lautrec. Like I said, he was from the aristocratic family, but he didn't hang around aristocrats. Because of his deformities, he was ridiculed by them. And also, he was too proud to ask aristocratic women out. In their eyes, he was a freak. So he was cut off from his own kind by his appearance. And this led to his growing alcoholism. And drinking absinthe as being one of those issues. And you can see the glass of absinthe there on the table. But he invented a drink called the earthquake cocktail. And this is absinthe mixed with cognac in a wine goblet. This also led to Toulouse-Lautrec visiting prostitutes. He frequented the house of prostitution in Paris, and these are brothels. He was fascinated by the lifestyle of the urban underclass. In these brothels, he didn't receive any judging. There was no pretentiousness. And the girls in the brothels inspired him. He did a lot of paintings. The point is, I'm getting to did a lot of paintings of women in the brothels, of prostitutes. And so here we're going to look at a couple. And this gives you the sense of the size of these artworks. One of the things I want to point out is look at these black stockings, and you notice the women dancing in that little bit. They had the black stockings, and that's a sign of well, that was a popular thing that prostitutes would wear. So these are prostitutes waiting for their clients to show up. And then also, here's one that he did of these two prostitutes in bed together. One of the things is, these prostitutes will often see the worst in men, and that kind of puts them off of men, and they develop these close friendships. And they would also often bond with each other. So there's some of that going on in these brothels. And one thing I want to point out is this image on the right, because I want to come back to this concept. So here are a couple of prostitutes waiting to see the doctor. So as for these brothels to stay in business, they had to be, I guess, disease free. So doctors would make regular visits to make sure everybody is healthy in these brothels. And so these women are waiting in line to see the doctor. And this image or something similar to this is going to come up in the next chapter. So towards the end of his life, his drinking got worse and worse. He had mental health issues. He had anxiety, paranoia, and depression. In 1899, in the alcoholic fit in the brothel, he was committed to an asylum by his mother. He was in and out of hospitals and asylums, and he suffered a decline of his health in his later years, and he was eventually paralyzed. All right, so let's move on to color theory. All right, so color theory was nothing new. Isaac Newton had done studies with color theory. However, what was new is a resurgence of study in color theory. In 1810, was a book published of the theory of colors. It was the 19th century witnessed a major developments in color theory, pigment manufacturing, and painting techniques. In 1840, Charles Locke Eastlake translated the Goethe book of color theory into different languages, and he added his own notes to it. And so there was a deeper understanding of color than the Royal Academy trading. This restored Goethe's Aristotelian emphasis on the eye's perception of color. So the bottom line is that color theory was a big deal in the 19th century art. And, this is kind of basically how color works. The science of color says that colors are light waves that the eye perceives. Objects absorb some waves of light and reflect others. So, for example, the sunlight is shining on the apple, and inside that sunlight are all the colors of the spectrum. The apple absorbs all the other colors except for red, and it reflects red. So, apples are not red, they just reflect red light. And with paint, in order to make orange, you would mix yellow and red together, and that creates orange. And that's with paint. But then we begin to look at how the eye perceives orange. So you can put red and yellow next to each other, and the eye will perceive it as orange. And this is kind of like in the 1960s. Comic books printed only with black, red, yellow, and blue. And they used the white of the paper as the fifth color. And So if you're only printing with the primary colors, red, yellow, blue, how do you get orange? Well, you would print with yellow and red and put them next to each other, and that creates orange. And that's called Bandai dots right here. So they're working on a system how one color placed in a series of dots next to the others creates a whole different color when it hits the retina of the human eye. If you put red and yellow dots next to each other, the eye will interpret it as orange. This is called optical mixture. So the artist that is experimenting with all of this is Georges Seurat. So this study in color leads us to this guy, Georges Seurat. Seurat was very interested in color theory. He spent most of his life thinking about color. He had been interested in finding the optical formula for painting since he was 17 years old, and he studied the theories on color. This guy is really important for modern art. And he read the theories of Michel Eugene Chevreul. He was a chemist who restored tapestries. And when Chevreul investigated why the dyes of the tapestries looked dull, he discovered that the dyes were actually bright, not dull. They just look dull because they are of what was placed next to them. So that leads us to this theory right here, is that colors are affected by other colors that are next to them. For example, we have a green square and a yellow square. And inside the green square, we have a yellow-green square. Inside the yellow square, we have a yellow-green square. Both yellow-green squares are exactly the same color. So when I made that image, I copy-pasted from one and put it on the other. Do those two yellow-green squares look like the same color? No. All right. So the one on the left, the yellow-green square, looks yellower. The one on the right looks greener. But that is because of the colors that surround them. The yellow-green that looks yellower on the left looks yellower because it's surrounded by green. The yellow-green on the right that looks greener because it is surrounded by yellow. Colors are affected by other colors next to them. And this guy also made modifications to the color wheel, and he studied opposite colors. So like green and red are opposite colors. And he realized that opposite colors look brighter when placed next to each other. Reds look redder when placed next to a green, and vice versa. So when we begin to look at these Georges Seurat paintings, and we'll take a look at this guy, we'll zoom in and notice that it is painted with dots. All right, so he paints with these very small dabbing type brushstrokes. He called it divisionism. We call it pointillism, but it's painting with very small brushstrokes, just dabs or dots. And the dots are a pure pigment right out of the tube. They are not mixed. And so these dots, when put next to each other, when we zoom back out, it looks like a different color. It looks like a blended color, but it's just dots of pure color. And one quote by him said, "Some say they see poetry in my paintings. I see only science." So we're going to take a look at this painting right here. Sunday afternoon on the island of Le Grand Jatte. And this gives you a sense of the size of the artwork. And if you look a little bit close, so let me first explain what Le Grand Jatte is. So Le Grand Jatte is an island. Well, first of all, there's a river that runs through Paris, and there's an island that is in the river in Paris. And the only way to access this island is by boat. It looks like there's a bridge there as well. But this is the image of where this painting comes from. Do you see it? Anyways, we have a modern subject matter here. This is the Impressionist theme of recreation. People are just here at a beautiful park, just having a good time at the day. They're just hanging out. But there are mixed social classes here, and that's also new, right? Before this, social classes didn't really mix well together. The new money made new social classes. More people could buy fashionable clothes, which is on display here. Before, the rich and the middle and the lower classes all had very different clothes. And there are rich people sharing the same spaces as the middle class and the lower class people here. Also, when you look at these people are not individuals. All right. They don't really have any personality here. Like I said, they kind of look like robots to me. How they're very vertical and it doesn't feel very natural. And there's not many faces, and the faces that are there are not very detailed. And we can identify the types of people here through their clothes. And also, this is not a narrative. It's not really telling a story. It's just like, we're just hanging out with these people and on the Grand Jetée as well. There's no narrative in their body language. There's no body language at all. So, and we'll look at some of these characters here. Over here, we have a working class woman. She's a nurse with her patient. And this guy is working class. And we can tell that he's working class because he has no sleeves on his shirt. And this woman right here, there's different art historians that say different things about this woman. Some say that she is a kept woman, that she is walking with her lover. And some people call her a high-class escort. And the reason why they think that she might have been a prostitute is the monkey down there by her feet. Monkeys were popular pets for prostitutes, but there's no proof one way or the other. Lautrec really never talked about who they are. One thing when I was looking at this painting, I was wondering, like, how do women make their dresses do that? And so I found this online. So it shows how it's a bustle is what this is. And so it shows how it's worn on the back. And so you can see it really makes a difference in the posterior. Anyways, the other one, this woman over here on the left, is also said to be a prostitute because she is fishing. The French word for fishing sounds like the French word for sin, but there's no proof of that either. Lautrec never really talked about who these people are. Then we have this young girl there, and the interpretation is that she is innocent. And the innocence of this kid so let me get back to so some art historians say that these women are prostitutes, but some art historians say they can't be prostitutes because we have this innocent child here. So, art historians will argue about what's going on here. And that's kind of what I like about art history, is that everybody can be looking at the same painting and coming up with different interpretations. It's a very linear composition. Notice all the vertical lines in this. And remember, I had talked about vertical lines in works of art, that it makes for like a boring action. Remember Rubens, the elevation of the cross, and how diagonal that looked. And it is very reminiscent of like the Greek relief sculptures showing the promenade of people walking to the Parthenon. Also, we have some interesting shapes. There's a rhythm in the parasols and postures. And then there's a lot of horizontal lines in here with one very strong diagonal line of the Jetée. He did lots of sketches for this, and X-rays show that he really worked on the composition, moving people to get them in exactly the right place. But here, if we look in very closely, we can see the dabs of color. And then if we look a little bit closer, so it would have taken him much longer to paint this whole picture with dabs of tiny little brush strokes. So what he did was he painted the background color and then he did dabs on top of it. So you can see the lighter green was painted on and then the darker green was dabbed on top. And then he did a border with blues and reds. All right, we're going to stop there for today. We will continue with the bathers at Asien.